I stood in the gleaming marble lobby of that luxury apartment building on Riverside Drive, my hands trembling so badly I had to clutch my worn purse just to keep steady, and watched my only daughter, my Emily, my precious girl, laugh at me. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed giggle, but a cold, triumphant laugh as she stood there with her boyfriend's arm draped around her shoulders, while the real estate agent shifted uncomfortably and two police officers walked through the glass doors behind me. That was the moment I understood that the daughter I had raised, the little girl I had sacrificed everything for, had stolen $750,000 from me, and she didn't feel even a whisper of shame. You know, I never thought I would be the kind of woman telling a story like this. I'm 68 years old now, and for most of my life, I believed that if you loved your children fiercely enough, if you gave them everything you had, they would love you back the same way. I suppose that makes me sound foolish, doesn't it? Maybe I was. But sitting here in my small, quiet apartment, the one I still have, thank God, I want to tell you what happened, because if even one person hears this and protects themselves, then maybe some good can come from the worst betrayal of my life. Let me start at the beginning because you need to understand who I was before that terrible day. I became a widow when I was 43 years old. My husband Robert died in a car accident, sudden and senseless, and he left me with a 9-year-old daughter and a modest life insurance policy. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to keep us going if I was careful. And oh, I was careful. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years, secretary during the day, bookkeeper for a small accounting firm 3 evenings a week. Every penny I didn't absolutely need for rent and food I saved. I saved for Emily's college fund. I saved for her future. I saved so she would never have to struggle the way I did. Emily was my whole world. After Robert died, she was all I had, and I poured everything into her. Piano lessons even though they cost a fortune. Summer camps when other kids went. A car when she turned 17 because she said all her friends had one and she felt left out. I said yes to almost everything because I remembered being young and wanting things, and because deep down I suppose I was afraid. Afraid that if I said no too often, she might pull away from me. Afraid of being alone. She went to a good college and I paid for every semester. When she graduated and wanted to move to the city to pursue her marketing career, I helped with her rent for the first year. When she met Derek 3 years ago, a smooth-talking investment banker with perfect teeth and empty eyes, I smiled and welcomed him to our family dinners, even though something about him made my stomach tight. A mother knows, you see. A mother feels these things. But I pushed those feelings down because Emily seemed happy. And isn't that what mothers want? For their children to be happy. She called me less often after she met Derek. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then every few months. When I mentioned it gently, carefully, she snapped at me. Told me I was being clingy, that she had her own life now. I apologized. I always apologized. Then came last spring. Emily visited me on a Sunday afternoon, which was unusual. She was affectionate in a way she hadn't been in years, holding my hand, asking about my health, telling me how much she loved me. She said she was worried about me getting older living alone. She asked if I had my legal documents in order, my will, my power of attorney. She said she wanted to make sure I was protected, that if anything happened to me, everything would be handled properly. I was so touched. I actually cried a little sitting there on my old sofa, because I thought my daughter was finally seeing me again, caring about me again. When she suggested I update my power of attorney and make her the sole holder, I didn't hesitate. She was my daughter, my only child. Who else would I trust? She said she would handle all the paperwork, make it easy for me. All I needed to do was sign. I signed everything she put in front of me. She watched me sign with those pretty eyes, her expression so loving and concerned. I remember thinking that maybe Derek was good for her after all. Maybe he was making her more mature, more thoughtful about family. Oh, how blind love makes us. For 2 months, everything seemed normal. Then, on a Wednesday morning in July, I received a phone call from my bank. They wanted to confirm a large loan application in my name. $750,000. I told them there must be a mistake. I hadn't applied for any loan. The woman on the phone went quiet for a moment, then asked me to come in immediately. I sat in that bank manager's office, staring at documents I couldn't quite focus on, while a kind woman named Patricia explained to me that someone had used my power of attorney, my social security number, my entire identity to secure a mortgage for a luxury apartment. The down payment had come from my savings account, $150,000 I had accumulated over 25 years of careful living. Gone. Just gone. And now I was responsible for a loan of $750,000, with monthly payments of over $4,000 on my modest pension of $2,200 a month. Patricia kept talking, her voice gentle but firm, explaining fraud procedures and police reports and credit freezes. But I couldn't hear her properly because there was this rushing sound in my ears, like standing too close to the ocean. My daughter had done this. Emily, the baby I had nursed through colic and croup, the little girl whose hand I had held on her first day of kindergarten, the teenager I had stayed up with all night when her heart was broken by her first boyfriend. That Emily had looked at me, at my trust, at my love, and seen only an opportunity. I want you to understand something about betrayal, especially betrayal by your own child. It doesn't feel like anger at first. Feels like drowning. It feels like the ground has disappeared beneath your feet, and you're falling through empty space, grasping for anything solid, finding nothing. I walked out of that bank in a daze, got into my old Honda, and just sat there in the parking lot for almost an hour, unable to turn the key, unable to think past the single thought spinning in my mind. She planned this. The power of attorney hadn't been about protecting me. The loving visit, the hand-holding, the tears in her eyes when she talked about wanting to take care of me, all of it had been a performance. A script. She had looked into my face, the face that had smiled at her every single day of her life, and lied with such conviction that I never suspected a thing. How long had she been planning it? Weeks? Months? Had she and Derek discussed it over dinner? Plotted out how to manipulate an old woman's loneliness and love? I drove home on autopilot and spent the rest of that day sitting in my armchair, the one Robert and I had bought 40 years ago, now worn but comfortable, and I let myself remember. I couldn't stop the memories from coming. Emily at 5, bringing me dandelions she had picked from the yard, calling them beautiful flowers. Emily at 12, crying because the popular girls were mean to her, and how I had held her and told her she was worth 10 of them. Emily at 18 hugging me so tight on her graduation day, and whispering thank you for everything, Mom. Had any of it been real? Or had I been so desperate for her love that I had imagined warmth where there was only calculation? That night I barely slept. When I did drift off, I had dreams about her as a baby, so small and perfect in my arms, depending on me for everything. I woke up crying, my pillow damp, my heart physically aching in my chest. People say heartbreak is just a metaphor, but I'm here to tell you it's not. Grief and betrayal hurt in your body. They make your chest tight and your stomach sick and your whole body feel heavy, like you're moving through water. The next morning, Thursday, I called Emily. My hands shook as I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and casual. I told her I knew about the loan. There was a pause, just a beat of silence, and then her voice changed completely. She wasn't angry or defensive. She was cold. She said I was overreacting, that she and Derek needed somewhere to live, that I was going to leave everything to her anyway, so what did it matter if she used it now? She said I was being selfish, that I had more money than I needed, living in my tiny apartment like some kind of miser while she was struggling. Struggling. My daughter, who I had paid $120,000 in college tuition for. My daughter, who had never gone without a single thing she wanted. She called me selfish for not wanting to be defrauded of everything I had worked for. Then she said something that changed everything. She laughed, that same cold laugh I would hear again in the apartment lobby, and told me I should be grateful she was still talking to me at all. She said Derek thought I was pathetic, always trying to buy her love with money, and that I should just accept that this was happening and be happy for her new apartment. Then she hung up. I sat there holding the phone for a long time after the call ended. And slowly, very slowly, something shifted inside me. The drowning feeling began to recede, and in its place came something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but cold and clear and focused. I had spent my entire adult life being gentle, being understanding, being the one who apologized and accommodated and sacrificed. And it had led me here, to being stolen from and mocked by my own child. I was 68 years old, but I was not dead yet. I was not helpless. I had survived losing my husband, raising a child alone, working until my feet ached and my eyes burned. I had survived poverty and loneliness and fear. And I would survive this. I picked up the phone again and called Patricia at the bank. I told her I wanted to file a police report for identity theft and fraud. I wanted to freeze my credit. I wanted copies of every document with my forged signature. My voice didn't shake this time. Then I made one more call. To a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Margaret Chen, and she was 56 years old with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her office was small but organized, and when I walked in that Friday morning with my folder of bank documents, she listened to my entire story without interrupting once. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said 3 words that gave me the first spark of hope I had felt since that phone call from the bank. "We can fight this." Margaret explained that what Emily had done wasn't just morally wrong. It was multiple felonies: identity theft, fraud, forgery, elder abuse. That last term hit me hard. Elder abuse. I was the victim of elder abuse, and my abuser was my own daughter. Margaret told me that cases like mine were more common than people realized, that family members often exploited elderly parents because they knew their victims would be too ashamed or heartbroken to press charges. She asked me very directly if I was prepared to see this through, if I was prepared to potentially send my daughter to prison. I looked at this woman I had just met and I told her yes, because the daughter I had loved didn't exist anymore if she ever had. The person who had stolen from me wasn't my little girl. She was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Margaret moved quickly. By Monday, we had filed a police report and a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. She also discovered something I hadn't known. The apartment closing was scheduled for the following Friday. Emily and Derek were planning to take possession of their luxury apartment in 6 days, and according to the paperwork, they had been shopping for furniture and planning a housewarming party. They thought they had one. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Sarah Morrison, maybe 40 years old, with tired eyes that suggested she had seen too much human cruelty. She came to my apartment on Tuesday evening and took my statement, recording everything. She asked if Emily had a history of financial problems or substance abuse. I told her no, just entitlement. Just a complete lack of empathy. Detective Morrison nodded like this was familiar territory. Then she asked if I would be willing to do something difficult. She wanted me to call Emily again with the police recording and try to get her to admit what she had done. They needed evidence beyond the documents, she explained. They needed Emily's own words. I felt sick at the thought, but I agreed. We made the call on Wednesday afternoon. Detective Morrison and Margaret were both there, the recording equipment set up on my kitchen table. I dialed Emily's number with shaking hands. She answered, sounding annoyed. I told her I had been thinking about what she said, that maybe I had overreacted. I asked her if we could talk about the apartment, maybe work something out. I hated every word coming out of my mouth, but I kept going. Emily's voice changed, became almost cheerful. She said she was glad I was finally being reasonable. Then, with Detective Morrison nodding encouragement at me, I asked her directly how she had gotten the loan approved. And she told me. She described the whole thing with such casual pride. How she had used the power of attorney I had given her. How she had forged my signature on the loan documents. How easy it had been because old people like you don't pay attention to details anymore. She even laughed about how the bank had called me, saying it was unfortunate timing, but that it didn't matter because there was nothing I could do about it now. I asked her why she thought this was acceptable, and her answer broke whatever small piece of my heart was still intact. She said, "Mom, you're going to die eventually anyway. Derek and I need this apartment now. You're just being selfish by holding on to money you're too old to enjoy. Think of it as an early inheritance." Detective Morrison signaled that we had enough. I told Emily I had to go and ended the call. Then I sat there at my kitchen table and cried while these 2 professional women, who dealt with criminals every day, looked at me with such genuine sadness that I knew they understood what it cost to hear your own child speak about your death as a convenience. But we had what we needed. Emily had confessed to everything in her own words with no coercion. Margaret told me that with this recording, combined with the forged documents and the financial evidence, we had an airtight case. She had already been in contact with the district attorney's office, and they were preparing arrest warrants. The plan was to execute them at the apartment closing, where both Emily and Derek would be present, where their crime would be most public and their humiliation most complete. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt ancient and hollow. But I also felt something else, something small but growing. a sense of my own power returning. That Friday morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock even though the closing wasn't until 11. I had barely slept, my mind running through everything that was about to happen. Margaret had called me the night before to confirm the plan. Detective Morrison and 2 other officers would meet me at the apartment building at 10:45. They would wait outside until Emily and Derek arrived, let them get inside with the real estate agent and the closing attorney, and then we would all walk in together. Margaret warned me it would be difficult to watch. I told her I understood. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a simple navy dress and the pearl necklace Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. I'm not sure why that mattered to me, but somehow I wanted to look dignified. I wanted Emily to see that I was still here, still standing, still her mother even though she had tried to destroy me. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. I had lost weight in the past 2 weeks. There were new lines around my mouth, deeper shadows under my eyes. But there was something else too, a hardness in my expression that hadn't been there before. Margaret picked me up at 10:15. We didn't talk much during the drive. She asked me once if I was sure I wanted to be there, reminded me that I didn't have to witness the arrest. I could wait in the car or go home and let the police handle everything. But I told her no. I needed to see this. I needed Emily to see my face and know that I had done this, that her helpless old mother had found her spine. We arrived at the building on Riverside Drive, and my breath caught when I saw it. Glass and steel and marble, with a doorman in a burgundy uniform and topiary trees flanking the entrance. This was what my life savings had bought for my daughter and her boyfriend. This monument to their greed and my humiliation. Detective Morrison was waiting on the corner with 2 uniformed officers. She came over to our car and leaned down to speak through the window. Emily and Derek had arrived 10 minutes ago, she told us. They were upstairs in the developer's office with the real estate agent. It was time. My legs felt weak as I walked across that gleaming lobby, Margaret on one side and Detective Morrison on the other. The doorman watched us with polite confusion, clearly wondering what police officers were doing in his expensive building. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, walked down a hushed hallway with plush carpeting, and stopped outside a glass door with gold lettering that read Prestige Properties. Through the glass I could see them. Emily wore a cream-colored dress I had never seen before, probably purchased specially for this occasion. Derek stood beside her in a tailored suit, his hand on her back in a possessive gesture that made my stomach turn. They were smiling, signing papers, their future spread out before them in leather portfolios and architects' drawings. The real estate agent, a thin woman in her 40s with impossibly white teeth, was pointing at something on a document. They all looked so pleased with themselves. Detective Morrison opened the door. The conversation inside stopped immediately. Emily looked up and saw me, and I watched her face change. Confusion first, then recognition, then fear as she noticed the uniformed officers behind me. She stood up quickly, knocking papers off the table. Derek's expression went from startled to angry in an instant. Detective Morrison announced herself, her voice calm and professional. She asked Emily to confirm her identity, which she did in a voice that had gone small and tight. Then the detective began reading her rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Emily's face went white. She looked at me and I saw her mouth form the word mom, but no sound came out. They arrested Derek too. Conspiracy to commit fraud, the detective explained. He had known the money wasn't legally Emily's. He had helped plan the purchase. He had signed documents as well. His face turned red with rage, and he started yelling about lawyers and lawsuits and how this was all a misunderstanding. The real estate agent backed into a corner, her mouth open in shock. The closing attorney gathered his papers with shaking hands. Emily started crying, real tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup running. She reached toward me and said my name again, this time out loud. Mom, please. Don't do this. I'm your daughter. Her voice broke on that last word, and I felt something crack inside me, but I didn't move. I stood there and watched the officers put handcuffs on her wrists, the metal clicking shut with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in that quiet office. They led them out through the lobby, and Emily kept turning back to look at me, kept crying, kept saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, that she loved me. Derek just stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his face a mask of fury. Other residents had gathered to watch, their expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to something that looked almost like satisfaction. The doorman held the door open as the police escorted my daughter and her boyfriend to separate patrol cars. I stood in that marble lobby and watched the cars drive away. And I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty nothing where my heart used to be. The weeks after the arrest passed in a strange blur of legal appointments and paperwork and phone calls that seemed to never end. Margaret worked tirelessly to unwind the financial damage Emily had done. The apartment sale was canceled immediately, of course. The mortgage was voided due to fraud. My savings account, what remained of it after Emily's down payment, was frozen as evidence, then eventually returned to me minus legal fees and court costs. I got back about $90,000 of my original $150,000. It wasn't everything, but it was something. It was enough to survive. Emily and Derek were both charged with multiple felonies. Derek's wealthy parents hired an expensive lawyer who managed to get him a plea deal. 3 years probation and restitution payments. Emily wasn't so fortunate. With the recorded phone call where she admitted everything, with the forged documents, with her complete lack of remorse during the initial police interview, the prosecutor had no interest in being lenient. Her public defender advised her to take a plea bargain. 2 years in minimum security prison followed by 5 years probation. She would be 70 when I was released. She took the deal. I didn't go to her sentencing. Margaret offered to accompany me. Said some victims found closure in facing their abusers in court. But I couldn't do it. I had seen enough of my daughter's face, heard enough of her voice. I stayed home that day and tended to my small balcony garden instead, repotting the geraniums I had been neglecting all summer. Emily wrote me letters from prison. They arrived every week at first, then every few weeks, then monthly. Long letters filled with apologies and explanations and pleas for forgiveness. She said Derek had manipulated her, that she had been under his influence, that she saw clearly now what a terrible mistake she had made. She said she loved me. She said she was sorry. She said could I please visit her. I read the first few letters all the way through, crying over each one, my heart torn between the mother's instinct to forgive and the knowledge that forgiveness without change meant nothing. Then I stopped reading them. I would open the envelopes, glance at the first lines, and file them away in a box in my closet. Maybe someday I would be ready to face those words. But not yet. Not while the wound was still so fresh. What surprised me was how life continued. I had thought that losing my only child, even to her own choices and consequences, would destroy me completely. I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone and broken, rattling around my apartment like a ghost. But that's not what happened. It started small. My neighbor, a woman named Rosa who lived 2 doors down, had noticed the police coming to my apartment during the investigation. She was 72, a widow like me, originally from Puerto Rico with the most beautiful accent and kind eyes. One morning she knocked on my door with a plate of pastels and asked, very gently, if I was all right. I don't know what made me do it, but I invited her in. And I told her everything. Rosa listened without judgment. When I finished, she held my hand and said something I will never forget. Mija, sometimes our blood family fails us. But that doesn't mean we have to be alone. She invited me to a weekly dinner group she attended at the community center. 6 older women, all widows or divorcees, who cooked together every Thursday evening. I hesitated, feeling too raw, too exposed. But Rosa's eyes were so warm, so insistent, that I finally agreed to try it once. That first Thursday, I met Anita and Joanne and Dolores and Pearl and May, women in their 60s and 70s, each with their own stories of loss and betrayal and survival. We cooked arroz con pollo together, our hands moving in rhythm, and they asked me gentle questions about my life. I found myself talking about Robert, about the good years before Emily changed, about my work and my struggles. And they shared their stories too. Anita's son had stolen her car and sold it for drugs before getting sober years later. Joanne's daughter had abandoned her grandchildren, leaving Joanne to raise them alone until they aged out. Dolores had been estranged from both her children for a decade over an inheritance dispute. These women understood. They didn't tell me I had to forgive Emily, or that blood was thicker than water, or any of those empty platitudes people offer when they're uncomfortable with real pain. They just accepted where I was, and they made space for me at their table. I started going every Thursday. Then Rosa and I began taking morning walks together 3 times a week. Pearl taught me how to knit. My first project was a crooked scarf in burgundy wool, but I was so proud of it. May invited me to her book club. Slowly, week by week, I built a new life around myself. Not the life I had imagined, not the life where my daughter called me and visited and brought hypothetical grandchildren to my door, but a real life with real friends, with laughter and purpose and connection. I volunteered at the senior center on Tuesday mornings, helping other elderly people navigate paperwork and apply for benefits. Margaret had mentioned that elder financial abuse was epidemic, and I realized I could use my painful experience to help others avoid it. I started a small support group for victims of family fraud. Only 3 people came to the first meeting. By the end of 6 months, we had 12 regular members. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who existed independently of being Emily's mother. Emily was released from prison on a Tuesday morning in early October, 18 months after I watched the police lead her away in handcuffs. I know this because she called me that afternoon from Derek's mother's house. Her voice on the phone was small and uncertain, so different from the cold, mocking tone I remembered. She said she was out. She said she had been going to therapy. She said she wanted to see me, to talk, to try to rebuild what she had destroyed. She was crying softly, and I could hear the desperation underneath her words. I listened to her entire message, and then I told her I needed time. I told her I was glad she was safe, and that I hoped therapy was helping her become a better person. But I also told her that I wasn't ready to see her, that I might never be ready, and that she needed to respect that boundary. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she whispered okay and hung up. Some people might think that makes me cruel, a mother who won't forgive her only child. But here's what I've learned in these past 2 years. Forgiveness isn't something you owe someone just because they're related to you. Forgiveness is a gift you give when the other person has genuinely changed, and when granting it won't destroy you in the process. Maybe someday I'll be ready to see Emily again. Maybe we'll have coffee somewhere neutral and I'll listen to her apologies and we'll find some small, careful version of a relationship. Or maybe we won't. And I've made peace with both possibilities. Because the truth is, I'm okay now. More than okay, actually. I'm happy in a way I'm not sure I ever was before. Even in my marriage, even before Emily's betrayal. It's a quiet happiness, built on a foundation of self-respect and chosen family and purpose. It's not the loud, desperate happiness of someone trying to earn love by giving everything away. It's the steady, peaceful happiness of someone who knows her own worth. My Thursday dinners with Rosa and the other women have become the highlight of my week. Last month, we celebrated Pearl's 75th birthday with a potluck that lasted until 10 at night. All of us laughing until our sides hurt over Dolores's story about accidentally joining a TikTok dance challenge at the grocery store. Joanne's grandchildren call me Auntie Ruth now, and I taught the youngest one to ride a bike last spring. May and I took a bus trip to Cape Cod in August and walked on the beach collecting shells, and I felt young again, light again, like I had shed some invisible weight I'd been carrying for decades. The support group I started has grown to 23 members. We meet twice a month now in a conference room at the library. I watch people come in broken and ashamed, carrying the same drowning feeling I once knew. And over weeks and months, I watch them transform. I watch them realize they're not alone, that what happened to them wasn't their fault, that they can survive this. One woman, Patricia, 71 years old and defrauded by her grandson, told me last week that I saved her life. She said before finding our group, she had been planning to end things because she couldn't bear the shame. Now she's thinking about writing a book about her experience. I cried when she told me this, but they were good tears. Purposeful tears. I'm 70 years old now. My hair is completely white, and my knees ache on cold mornings, and I need reading glasses for everything. But I feel more alive than I did at 40 or 50 or 60. I feel like I finally understand what it means to be myself, not just someone's wife or someone's mother, but Ruth. Just Ruth. A woman with friends and hobbies and opinions and boundaries. A woman who takes up space in the world without apologizing for it. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I still think about Emily as a little girl. I remember her small hand in mine, her absolute trust that I would keep her safe. And I feel sad for both of us, for the mother who loved too desperately and the daughter who mistook that desperation for weakness. But I don't let myself drown in that sadness anymore. I acknowledge it, and then I let it pass through me like a wave, knowing it will recede. I keep her letters in a box in my closet. All 63 of them. I haven't opened one in over a year, but I haven't thrown them away either. Maybe that box is my version of leaving the door unlocked without standing by it waiting. She knows where I am if she truly changes. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not putting my life on hold for that possibility. Last week, I started taking a watercolor painting class at the senior center. I'm terrible at it. My trees look like blobs and my flowers are lopsided, but I love it. I love the feel of the brush in my hand, the way the colors bleed into each other on the wet paper, the quiet concentration required. My teacher, a patient man named George who's 76, told me that art isn't about perfection. It's about expression, about putting something of yourself into the world. I think about that a lot now. About expression versus perfection. I spent so many years trying to be the perfect mother, sacrificing everything, saying yes to everything, molding myself into whatever I thought Emily needed. And it still wasn't enough because nothing ever would have been enough. Emily's problems weren't about me or what I did or didn't give her. They were about her own choices, her own character, her own work to do. So now I paint my crooked flowers and cook with my friends and help other elderly people protect themselves from predators who wear familiar faces. I wake up each morning and decide how to spend my day based on what I want, what brings me joy, what feels meaningful. It's a radical act, really, this choosing myself. At 70 years old, I'm finally learning how to do it. If you're listening to this story and you see yourself in it, if you have an adult child who takes and gives nothing back, if you have family members who treat your love like a resource to be mined, please hear me when I say this: it is not too late. It is never too late to draw a boundary, to protect yourself, to demand dignity and respect. You are not selfish for wanting these things. You are not cruel for enforcing consequences. You are not a bad parent for letting your adult children face the results of their own choices. Love should not cost you everything. Real love, healthy love, is reciprocal and respectful and kind. Anything else is just exploitation wearing love's mask. I don't know what will happen with Emily. Maybe she'll do the deep work required to become someone capable of real relationship. Maybe she won't. But either way, I'll be okay. Because I've finally learned the most important lesson of my life. I am enough just as I am, even if I'm alone. I am worthy of love and respect and peace, not because of what I give others, but simply because I exist. And so are you, my dear listener. So are you.